Evan from RocklinGraves Productions, welcome into Forever Forward, man.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be doing this.
Yeah, man, it's exciting. We were just talking a bit off camera. I was always terrified of horror movies growing up, and I've been experiencing the horror genre through your videos because I'm too much of a baby to watch the full movie. So I guess I just want to thank you up front for allowing me to have that.
Well, I want to thank you for giving me that honor. That means a lot. I'm very glad to hear that. And who knows, maybe this is your gateway in.
Yeah, man, it could be. Well, look, you had said that you are a lifelong fan of horror. And for me, as somebody that, as I just said, was very scared of this from an early age, I'm curious, how does one become a lifelong fan? Meaning you must have enjoyed this from a young age.
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in horror and horror adjacent things. Like reading Goosebumps growing up and reading Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was kind of like a big gateway for me in elementary school. You weren't supposed to be able to get Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark out of the library as a kid, but the librarian knew I was too far gone already. We had an understanding. So I used to read those a lot, but the big thing was just my dad was super into it. So his father used to read him ghost stories before bed instead of actual bedtime stories, and in his free time he would go ghost hunting. So he passed that on to my father, and then my dad kind of I was always around horror growing up, watching, the old school Universal monster movies like Frankenstein and Wolfman and all that. And a huge, which is the intro to every one of my videos, is this Halloween display that he built by hand, which is everything that you see in the intro there. It's basically carved styrofoam that he would then just we would shape it into tombstones and pillars and whatever, and then he would paint it, and we would do this whole display with fog machines and lights and music. And I remember as a kid going trick-or-treating and walking out into the driveway and seeing that and hearing the music go and the fog and everything, and there was an atmosphere to that from probably 3-4 years old,
yeah,
where I was immediately oh, there's something alluring about the mystery of Halloween night. And that was definitely the thing that really drew me into it. But then it was just natural progression of oh, I like that, let me start reading some Goosebumps or whatever. And then as you get older, it's oh, now I can watch Halloween. And then
right.
Once I saw Halloween, it was over.
Well,
that was
That's a question I have for you, and just to put a pin in that, it's so interesting the way you explain this. It almost feels like horror is almost nostalgic for you.
Oh, dude, absolutely. One of the biggest draws for me for horror is the nostalgia of it. There are so many movies, just talking about them will make me feel all warm and fuzzy, even though it's something like
yeah.
The Exorcist, where it's
right.
The most horrific things going on. I'm still I remember
right.
seeing that for the first time.
And then, pair that with the content of those films. It's just really, really interesting.
Exactly, yeah.
So you had mentioned Halloween. Was that the first horror film you ever saw? I assume no, but I'm curious.
No.
Do you remember the first one that you ever watched, start to finish?
I had always said for many years, and I even said this recently when I was on Sledgehammer Horror, that my first horror movie was Paranormal Activity, which I think is the case. But I also don't remember how old I was when I saw the original Nosferatu.
Okay, and that's an old one, right?
It's from 1922.
Yeah.
Or when I saw Jaws for the first time. So
is Jaws considered a horror film?
I would consider it a horror film. I mean,
Yeah,
it
I
scared
think
people
it
from
is.
going into the water for years, right? People wouldn't swim for ages. So, I mean, I think if it's scaring the hell out of people, you can call it a horror movie.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so it was either Paranormal Activity, the original Nosferatu, because I saw that at a very young age, or Jaws.
So something to note about Paranormal Activity. I think Paranormal Activity has the greatest marketing campaign of any film, of maybe any piece of media I've ever seen.
It was phenomenal.
I think the trailer, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm thinking back, was something along the lines of just I think it showed folks in a movie theater saying these folks didn't know what they were about to see. Here's what happened. And then it just
That was all the marketing, was basically just these night vision shots of people seeing it in a screening for the first time and their reactions to it, which is absolutely genius. I don't know if it quite beats out the Blair Witch Project, because people were brought to court thinking that the actors were actually killed for that. But
what was that one? I think the trailer said something along the lines of 5 people went in the woods.
It wasn't necessarily the trailer. It was just the whole marketing campaign itself, where they were putting up missing person posters all over different towns. They made a website to if you see these people, contact authority. They
did this in real life.
Yeah, they went hard for the Blair Witch marketing, and it worked. It clearly worked.
Yeah.
So to me, that's probably the most impressive. But yes, Paranormal Activity has one of the best marketing campaigns in terms of trailer material that has ever happened.
Well, look, I'm super interested to dive into horror just as a genre and as an art form with you. obviously I'm a frequenter of action films and comedy films, but I will say now, like, horror is a medium that I feel like is very adaptable to telling a whole bunch of different types of stories. I think some people view horror as just like jump scares or gore fest, but I feel like it's a little bit more than that. Do you have anything to say on, I guess, like what the genre can provide as a framework for telling, actually good stories?
There is a fun factor to slasher movies, and there's nothing wrong with like enjoying fun popcorn jump scare ridden horror movies. I enjoy those too. I've got many of them on Blu-ray. Like, it can be fun to put those on, but the thing that really draws me to horror is that it allows really difficult concepts to kind of be manifested into something physical that can then be dealt with in a really interesting way that other genres don't allow. You look at something like Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House. At the front, it's a ghost story, basically.
Yeah.
But what it really is a story about family and connection and sacrifice and parenthood and all of these beautiful things that they're able to explore because of using a ghost story as a platform for that. Same thing with The Exorcist, which you go, oh, that's about a possessed girl. Kind of. It's really about like struggles of faith and, again, parenthood and religion and religious doubt and all of these beautiful themes that are able to be kind of touched on in ways that are very unique to the horror genre. So I think that's the thing that fascinates me most about it, is that ability to kind of have these concepts like death and loss and loneliness be manifested as something tangible for the story to deal with.
That was so exceptionally well said. And I couldn't agree more. I think, for me specifically, like, so I said I've never seen a horror movie start to finish. I have watched Hereditary because I don't even know what genre I should put Hereditary into, but I think that's...
You have a wild first pick for you're like, my first movie in the theater is going to be Terrifier 3, and my only horror movie I've seen start to finish is Hereditary. What are you doing to yourself?
What I will say is that, I didn't even realize it was a horror film, to be honest, and obviously it's in the horror genre, but like as just a blank canvas to tell a story about generational trauma is just fascinating. And you leave that film feeling not necessarily scared. You leave it feeling something else. And I think some people don't understand that, look, some horror films are meant to scare you and jump scare you, but some horror films are meant to get at something deeper. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the genre, that candidly, like, action movies just, I don't know if they can get there.
No, I mean, and there's certainly like more serious action movies that do deal with some thematic things in the same way that there are cornier horror movies that are just silly and goofy, like some action movies are. But yeah, I do think that there is something unique about the way that horror enables that sort of thematic exploration. Hereditary is a great example of that. That movie is ridiculously well written.
Yeah, ridiculously good. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I think there is some fun, which you had referred to as slasher, torture porn, whatever you call it. I don't know. Is there anything to be said for, a movie like, let's say, Terrifier, right? Like, do you view movies like that more as just something you go and see as kind of like a fun thing, or do you think that they're trying to get at something more with something like that?
It depends, really. Like, it depends on the movie. With Terrifier, I mostly watch just to like have a good time. It's just like really fun, like escapism, pushing everything to the extreme and just being crazy with it. Like Terrifier 2 is like obviously it's a slasher movie, but it's also like this bizarre fantasy odyssey that I just find a ton of fun. But then there are slasher movies, and I'm going to bring this up, and there's going to be arguments about how effective the exploration of this were, but like David Gordon Green's Halloween movies, where he was trying to do something more than just telling a slasher story with those movies. So you certainly can do it, and that's a lot of fun, but I also don't think that there's anything wrong with just enjoying schlock. There's so much fun to be had there. I mean, it's comfort candy, dude. Like, it's bizarre. Like, you mentioned Terrifier, and it's strange because of how extreme that is, but I find Terrifier 2 to be a very cozy movie.
That is the wildest thing ever said on this podcast. But
it's true. And I showed it to my brother for the first time, and partway through he's like, "Why is this so like cozy?" And I was like, "I know, exactly."
Maybe, I'm sure he grew up similar to you and has that sense of nostalgia, but there is something to be said. Like, I'm sure that some people view the Saw films as like their comfort films. And maybe
which I understand less, but
maybe less, but I think it's just been really interesting to see how you take this stuff versus what I thought the perception of these films were. So look, I think I'm an aspiring content creator. I'm an aspiring larger content creator. Let's put it that way. Your platform has really grown a whole lot and started to take off in a major way. What's that been like for you?
I mean, it like, not speaking hyperbolically, it has literally been life-changing.
Yeah.
Because I am now doing this full time.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's only been a couple months now, since May was when I started going full time. But yeah, I mean, I started at the start of the year, I had 2,400 subscribers.
And now you're what, 40,000?
Yeah, about to hit 40,000, which is just, I mean, it's absolutely surreal. Like, I've been making videos on this channel since 2021, so it's been like coming on 3 years now.
Yeah.
And most of that was just like nothing, absolutely nothing. And then in the span of like 6 months, it has absolutely changed and completely shifted my life and my day-to-day experience. So yeah, I mean, it's been colossally impactful on my life.
What was it about YouTube that made you want to start a channel? Was there anything that made you like, oh, I really want to do this? Or no, one day you were like, hey, let me just give this a shot?
Well, I mean, I grew up watching YouTube, right? Like, I think I might be a little younger than you. I don't know. I'm 22.
I'm 28, so you've got, I got you by a few.
Yeah, so I was born in 2001, and then YouTube came out in, what was it, 2005, I think. Yeah. So, like, for me, PewDiePie's videos and Smosh videos were like Saturday morning cartoons. Like, this was what I grew up watching. So I kind of I was always drawn to it. And I've been making YouTube videos since I was 10 years old.
Are those locked away on other channels?
Those are hidden. They're not privated. They're still out there. But I'm not revealing the names of any of them.
Understood.
But they do exist. Yeah, I've been making videos for ages, so it's always something that I've wanted to try and do. But I think the big thing with RocklinGraves was that horror is just something that I so deeply care about, and I feel like I'm somewhat knowledgeable on, and I just really wanted to share that. And I think when there's that passion, it comes across, and eventually, if you're just consistent enough, it's going to click. So for me, that was kind of the thing that drew me into wanting to create content. And I started RocklinGraves because Halloween Kills was coming out, and I was so unbelievably excited for it that I wanted to talk about it all the time, and I'm sure everyone around me like wanted to kill me.
So it was like your outlet.
Exactly. I've always said I started this channel because I wanted to talk about horror more than anyone around me wanted to hear about it. So
I love that, man. I absolutely love that. And I love that you said about the consistency point, right? I think one of the challenging things is consistently uploading and posting.
Totally.
And you don't get results. I can imagine you resonated. Could you just talk a bit about what it was like to have been posting, and maybe not growing as fast as you want? And then all of a sudden now you have videos that are breaching 100,000 views on the regular.
That, first of all, that's just surreal to even hear that. But yeah, it's wild. There were really two spikes for me. One was when I did the original Exorcist, and then the second was Sinister, and that was the really big one. But like, I remember when I was working on that Sinister video, the first like January, February of this year, I was feeling really, really discouraged with like the trajectory of the channel, where it was just flatlined. There was nothing happening. There was a spike from The Exorcist, and then it just died, and it was just this crawl up a increasingly steep hill. And even while I was working on the Sinister video, I was like, this video is such a mess. It's all over the place. This doesn't make any sense. And I was thinking, like, do I just want to like rewrite this whole thing, just scrap it and start from the beginning? And when I was working on the thumbnail, I was like, my God, this looks so gaudy. And then I uploaded it, and it has 600 some odd thousand views now.
I just checked. It's over 6.
Yeah, it's by far the most successful video I've ever put up. So it was at a point where I was like, man, I don't know if this is ever going to happen. And then all of a sudden it happened like that. So it really, people say it all the time. It only takes one video, and you're like, yeah, whatever. It really does. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes that one that clicks, and it went up at the right time, because this was when like Night Swim was coming out, and The Exorcist Believer had just come out, and Blumhouse was in a really bad spot. And then I was going, oh man, Blumhouse used to make some really good movies. I want to talk about Sinister. And I think that was probably the main reason that it resonated, was because there were all these terrible Blumhouse movies. And then I decided just to make a video about a really good Blumhouse movie, and it just took off. So yeah, it can happen extremely quickly.
Look, I have to ask, I can imagine you've seen thousands of horror films. Do you have a collection of physical media as well? Do you collect Blu-rays or DVDs?
Yeah, I have a Blu-ray collection that's just out of camera up on this shelf. You can kind of see the tail end of it there.
Yeah.
There's probably around 450, 500 Blu-rays in there.
Oh my gosh.
I would say about half to 3/4 of it is horror.
Okay.
So most of it's horror, but then there are also a lot of things that I love that aren't strictly horror. So there's tons in there that isn't that.
And I have to ask, what is your preferred way to watch? Like when you watch a horror film, right? Is it in theaters or is it not? Is it at home? I can imagine you have a decent setup. I don't know if it's a Blu-ray or what. What's the go-to?
Yeah. There's something that's really special about seeing movies in theaters when it all works out properly. But the issue is that, not to like go on a tangent, I feel like I tried not to sound pretentious when I'm saying this, but like general audiences consume movies in a more disposable way than I personally like to.
Well, I'm extremely interested in what you mean by that.
Yeah, so where, you know, people will go on their phones while they're watching a movie, or they'll be talking during it, or when they leave that movie, like a movie for them is just like, oh, we need to go out and do something fun on whatever night they were going out. But for me, it's like, I really, really care about, this sounds so douchey. I really care about the craft of storytelling, and I love to immerse myself in that. And it gets difficult sometimes going to the movie theater because there are people who are talking the whole time or are on their phones or are like taking videos of the movie like in the row in front of you. Yeah. And it can be really, really distracting. So I think generally I have a more impactful viewing at my house now, especially since I just recently bought an OLED, and now it's like, now it's just beautiful. I love going to the movie theater though, and I'm never not going to go to the theater. Yeah, and it's fun for a first viewing, but I always get nervous like going to movies that I'm really, really excited for because I'm like, this crowd could just ruin my experience with this for the first time.
100%. And I feel like, you know, especially with you as somebody who is so committed to this craft of storytelling, some folks do go to horror movies to, you know, have a ball, have a riot, right?
Yeah,
and you're not there for that.
I mean, sometimes I am.
Yeah, to be fair.
And there are some movies where it doesn't bother me if that's happening, but there are some where it definitely does.
Yeah. So no, I can absolutely imagine, man. So as somebody who is a horror movie mogul, I will say I have 5 questions that you can answer rapidly. Here we go. Favorite horror film of all time?
Can I give you 3?
You absolutely can. And I'm even going to ask you why.
Just off the top of my head. And keep in mind, this changes all the time. Okay. But I'm going to try and list out the ones that are the most consistently in my answers. The Exorcist is the first one that comes to mind for me. I think that is such a perfect example of the power of the horror genre to explore some very, very beautiful material while also being this like great atmospheric, scary horror movie that just has some of my favorite characters in all of film. Yeah. Damien Karras is one of my all-time favorite characters in any piece of media. Absolutely love The Exorcist. I'm going to go with the original Halloween. I have so much nostalgia for that movie. I think it's a perfect example of how to just like focus on atmosphere and take a really, really simple concept and nail it with execution. I watch that movie every Halloween night, and I will for the rest of my life. I have since I was 10 or 11, I think.
So that's your Halloween movie, is Halloween.
That and Trick or Treat. I watch Trick or Treat and then Halloween. I've been doing that routine for many, many years now, and I will continue to do it forever. Okay. And then I'm going to throw in... I'm having trouble deciding between The Witch and The Lighthouse from Robert Eggers.
I've seen neither, nor do I know who that is, and that shows my lack of knowledge of the space.
Well, so he's my favorite director. Robert Eggers. He is just like a stylistic wizard. He does like all period piece horror movies, and it's all very gothic and very atmospheric. And I really, really love his approach to filmmaking. I'm gonna go with The Lighthouse just because I get the urge to rewatch it more often than I get the urge to rewatch The Witch. Because The Lighthouse is so weird that I feel like every time I throw it on, I'm like picking up on new details. But there's just such an alluring atmosphere to it. It's a black and white movie. It's shot in like a very boxy aspect ratio, and it's just these 2 lighthouse keepers basically going insane.
So it's a horror film, but it seems like it has a fairly straightforward precedent.
Yeah, no, there's a simple premise, but the movie gets insane. Like it is a wild, wild movie. But I'm just fascinated by it, and I'm doing a video on it later this year, and I cannot wait.
So as far as, you know, what's upcoming, what's the horror film you're most excited for?
Don't know if you can see it. It's embroidered into my hat right now.
Yeah.
But this is from Robert Eggers, Nosferatu. Robert Eggers is remaking Nosferatu, which, as I said, may have been the first horror movie I ever saw. Right. And Eggers is my favorite director. He has been talking about Nosferatu for... I've been listening to him talk about it for a decade now.
And it's finally going to come out. It's really coming?
So he's been wanting to do this since he started his career. In high school, he put on a play for Nosferatu. This is a story that he's cared about for ages. The original movie was the thing that got him into filmmaking when he was a kid. So it's been a huge passion project, and it's finally come together, and it's coming out on Christmas Day.
Wow.
Which is the best Christmas present for me. But I remember my dad and I watching the bonus features for The Witch back in 2015, whenever the Blu-ray came out. And there was a panel that they did in Salem for that. And he was talking about Nosferatu back then. So like we had been following that for forever.
But it's officially dropping on Christmas.
It's
Confirmed.
Officially dropping Christmas Day.
Wow.
Can't wait.
All right. So now on to what horror film has scared you the most? And I don't really know how to define scared. But,
you don't have to. That's an easy answer.
All right. What is it?
Lake Mungo.
I've never heard of that one. Yeah. What is it?
Yeah. That's not uncommon. It's a very obscure, less obscure now. It's been getting more attention over the last couple of years, but it's still quite obscure. It's an Australian mockumentary. It's like a fake documentary.
Yep.
About a family who has recently lost their daughter. She drowned in a lake, not Lake Mungo, which is always confusing.
Okay.
But it's basically all just like talking head interviews of them recounting things that led up to the time that she drowned, and then some things that happened afterwards. And it's very, very subtle, and I try not to oversell it for people because I've only shown it to one other person who had the same reaction as I do, and that was my brother. So maybe there's something genetic going on there.
And also just absolutely terrified?
Yeah, I thought I was past the point of being like truly scared by movies in the way that I felt as a kid. Like I just thought I was never going to feel that again because I've just watched too many horror movies.
Yeah.
And then I put on Lake Mungo and it was like mouth drying out, like heart beating out of my chest, like hands shaking. It was terrifying. And I watched it twice in the same day when I first saw it.
Do you just needed to see it again?
I was like, I need to do that again. Like, I was so blown away. I've seen it like 7 times.
That just goes to show how much you like this genre. Like, most people would be like, I'm literally throwing that in the trash, and I'm never looking at it. You were like, let's run it back.
I just watched a movie the other day that had, not like scared, so that's why I'm not mentioning it, but just like really disturbed. Like, my hand was shaking by the end because it was just very messed up.
Yeah.
And I can't stop thinking about it because I was like, God, that was really good.
You're sick, man.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting though. Like, I did want to ask you, do you even get scared when you watch horror movies nowadays, or no? Scared
Generally
is not the right
speaking,
word.
no.
Yeah.
The way that people will ask me like, oh, is this movie too scary? Do you think? I'm always like, I am the wrong person to ask. You would think that someone who watches horror a lot is the right person to ask. Nope. Don't ask someone who watches horror all the time if something is scary. My meter for if something is scary is how excited I'm getting by it.
Right,
now that's not the case for Lake Mungo, where I was like genuinely afraid.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, if I'm smiling and giddy, that means it's really scary.
Do jump scares still get you, or are you past those movies that have jump scares?
Not usually. Yeah. No, there's a hand, like it has to be really well done. Like Haunting of Hill House, the Mike Flanagan series, has one that got me.
Yeah.
But I mean, that came out 6 years ago. You see enough of it, and you see the warning signs coming too, so you just know it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, so I don't even know if this is going to be applicable to you, because I know when you're at the movie theater, you're probably most often like dialed in. But if you had a go-to movie theater snack drink combo, what would you say it is?
Some movies I don't get snacks for, but some I definitely do. Okay. And my go-to recently, because I realized that it was the same price as getting a popcorn, which is crazy, was a hot dog and nachos.
Dude, I went to the movies 2 weeks ago. Now, I saw Inside Out. I saw Inside Out too. So a bit different when you come to genre there. But my girlfriend and I split a hot dog nachos, and it was like $9. And a popcorn was like, $9.50.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And the movie theater, I don't know. I'm sure if in places like the USA, this has been a thing for a while, but in Canada, at least where I am, they just introduced beer into the movie theaters.
They did here as well.
Okay, so that has certainly been added to my go-tos.
Yeah.
I just watched the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy in the theater. Recently they re-released the extended cuts of all of them.
Did you watch them back to back to back?
No, it was 3 days. So you would go like one day was Fellowship, the next was Two Towers, and then Return of the King.
Yeah.
And I went with my buddy, and we went to all 3, and I was having hot dogs, nachos, and beers the whole time, and it was great.
It's funny, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Are you somebody that believes the extended editions are the better editions, or do you believe the standard edition is the best one?
the extended cut is just like objectively better.
Well, there you go. See, I would argue the opposite, but we can agree to disagree on that. Yeah, I think what they included, I think it's a masterpiece. I really do think it's a masterpiece as is.
All right.
I actually recently rewatched the trilogy as well. I watched it in my home, but I recently got like a nice sound bar and a beautiful OLED TV. You'd be surprised how much a decent audio setup and a nice TV changes the experience.
We've had surround for a while, but the jump to OLED has been like, okay.
Yeah, you're like, I got it.
I checked out. I just threw in my 4K Blu-ray of The Revenant the other day, and I was like,
you're like, now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. All right, last question for you. And I know we already talked about your collection and the amount of things that you have in it, but I am curious, what is the most expensive piece that you have in that collection?
That's a good question. Because there have been a couple movies that were like out of print collector's editions that I bought on eBay at like inflated prices. Lake Mungo might have been the one that I spent the most on because I was like, I just need to get the collector's set.
Well, it seems like you got a good amount out of it. Seems like
I was like, I just need to have that. There was that. I spent a lot on a steelbook for The Ring, which I'm now regretting because they were releasing a 4K steelbook on it now that I wouldn't have needed to spend all this money on.
Yep.
But I also can't remember like how much my Evil Dead box set was. You know what? I guess it would have been the Friday the 13th box set.
How much? And how much do those go for? Like hundreds, thousands?
No, God, no, not thousands. Lake Mungo was probably around $100, like all said and done. The Ring was around that too. But the Friday the 13th set, $250 maybe, something like that. But I mean, you're getting 13 movies out of that, so it's like,
it's a good deal.
It's easy. Yeah.
All right, so look, two more ones that I'm curious about for you, and then we'll wrap up. The first is, where did the name RocklinGraves come from? Because I actually, when I first found your channel, I thought that was your name, RocklinGraves. Obviously, it's not. Where does that come from?
So the Halloween setup that I was telling you about that my dad built, we grew up on a street, Rocklin, and when he built his display, if you can see it in the intro, carved into the two pillars at the front, one says Rocklin, the other says Graves, so the display was called RocklinGraves.
You're kidding.
No, seriously, you can see it in the intro too. It's carved into those.
Well,
those
I thought
pillars.
that was just because it's your channel's name, but obviously there's more behind that.
Yeah, so that was the Halloween display that like got me into loving horror initially. So when I was starting a horror channel, I was like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah, man.
Productions, no question.
I love that. All right, my last question is this. What's next for RocklinGraves? I mean, any interesting projects on the way? Anything you want to, I don't know, preview, or any content that you'd like to evolve into, or more of the same? And if more of the same, I think we'd be happy to have that.
I appreciate that. No, I'm definitely trying to pull all of my focus back into making like long form video essays, where I feel like I've been kind of getting caught up in like doing spoiler free reviews of like new movies or like trailer analysis stuff.
Yeah.
And it's fun, but it's not like the thing that I really love doing, which is just like diving into the story craft of a film. So
there's a channel run by a guy, I believe his name is Ryan Hollinger, who I think is quite good.
I know him.
Yeah, you remind me exactly of him. I think your channels are quite comparable. So
Thank you.
I know he's a little bit bigger, but you know, if that's
he's
the
huge,
goal,
so I appreciate that.
if that's the goal, you're him already. The subscribers are to come.
Thank you, man. That's very kind of you.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to like pivot back into like fully focusing on that. But the big things that are coming, because there are things coming, especially because we're heading into spooky month, of course, soon. I'm going to be tackling a lot of things that I've kind of been putting off out of nervousness because I'm like, I need to do it justice. Lake Mungo is one of them.
Really?
Yeah. So I have a video of that coming out on October 7th. And then the week after that, I'm going to be tackling The Witch, one of Robert Eggers' first feature film. Another thing I've been putting off. And eventually, at some point down the line, because I get comments about this every day, I will be covering Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House, the 10-episode miniseries, which is probably just going to end up being like a 3-4 hour long video essay because I don't know how to. I don't know how else to do that. But those are kind of like the big things that are floating around in my head right now.
Beautiful, man. Well, look, this has been tremendous.
And short films. I want to try and make my own short films. So
you want to create, like produce your own films?
Yeah, I mean, writing is ultimately what I want to wind up doing. Like this is so much fun, but if I can eventually pivot into a career in writing, like I'm writing a book right now. I'm working on a couple different short films. I write music. Like I just love writing. Yeah. So if I can pivot into that would be.
Well, I noticed the piano to your left or right, whatever the mirror is. Are you a musician as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A man of many talents. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Evan. I can't thank you enough. And look, this is what this podcast is all about, is people that are super passionate about something and living their life, trying to pursue the pursuit of exactly that. So thanks for joining, man.
Totally, man. Yeah, thanks for having me on.